Next, let's look at the relationship between blood pressure and cross-sectional area. The cross-sectional area of an individual arterial or artery, for example, is going to depend on the diameter of that artery. It'll also depend whether or not that is vasoconstricted or not. So in an individual vessel, for example, if I were looking at the cross-sectional area of each of those blood vessels, well, it should be fairly obvious to you that the larger blood vessel has the greater cross-sectional area. But now we're going to get into this idea of total cross-sectional area. So if I can stick with my large vessel, but I'm now going to start going and adding a bunch of small vessels, you can see that if I were to add up the cross-sectional area of all of these small ones, if I create enough of the small ones, notice, I'm hoping by now it becomes obvious that, hey, look at this, if I add up all of the cross-sectional areas, I have a lot more cross-sectional area in the small blood vessels than I do in the large ones. And so that's an interesting phenomenon that occurs in the circulatory system. So let's take a look at that over here. So I'm going to zoom in on this graph right here, or this figure right here. And I want you to look at, we're going to look at the bottom graph in a second. I want you to look first at this diagram here and then at this graph up here. So if we look at the aorta, okay, this is going to represent the aorta. It's a single, very large blood vessel as it exits the heart, and then it does start to branch. And as it branches, we're taking the blood flow that is in that aorta and we're starting to divide it up, and we're starting to send it in different directions. And these then would represent the various arteries of the circulatory system. And those arteries then in turn will divide again into my arterioles, which are going to be represented here. And of course we have mini arterioles, and then those arterioles are going to divide again to give us our capillary beds, like so, before we converge once again into the venules, the veins, and then finally the vena cava. Now let's go up here and look at total cross-sectional area, emphasis on the total part. Well, as my aorta begins to divide, even though an individual artery branching off of that aorta might be smaller in diameter, the sum of the cross-sectional areas for all of those is going to be larger in diameter. And the more branches we have, the more that cross-sectional area more cross-sectional area we have in total. And then when we hit my arterioles, we have so many arterioles that we rapidly see an increase in the cross-sectional area. And then the capillary beds, that's where the maximum cross-sectional area is. And then of course all of that changes again when we get into the venules and the veins and the vena cava. Now let's look at its relationship on pressure. Moving down here, I want you to look at this. Pressure stays pretty high in the aorta, of course, we're right by the heart, but also in the arteries. However, we start to divide those arteries, we start to lose pressure. And so the pressure here and here and here is substantially lower than the pressure here. And you can see with each branch I start to lose pressure. And when I get to the capillaries, I continue to lose that pressure. And you can kind of see value-wise, some of the capillary beds might be at about 35-ish. And then as we continue to move through those capillary beds, we've got the arterial side and the venule side, and you'll notice on the venule side it's really quite low. And then we're going to move into the venules and the veins and the vena cava, and by the time we hit that vena cava, we're almost at zero. Not quite exactly zero, but almost at zero. Now you're probably wondering, why on earth does this even matter? Well, it matters because of this. This is the take-home message. This is the so what, this is the why you care. Fluid always flows from high pressure to low pressure. And right here we can see the branches in the circulatory system create this high and low pressure system that we need to keep the fluid moving from the aorta to the arteries to the venule, or to the arterioles, to the capillaries, to the venules, to the veins, and to the vena cava. Now, the purpose of these branches is not just about pressure. Of course, we're also increasing surface area, which is very necessary for the capillaries, right? We need that surface area. We need those thin endothelial cells so we can get gas exchange and fluid exchange and so forth. But this is the take-home message. Why do we care? It's because we care about pressure. We care, everything is about pressure and surface area and all of that good stuff there. And so this fits nicely into the pressure, blood pressure discussion, because we can see that we've got a one-way direction, a one-way street, a one-way road for blood flow. That's the basic idea there. Oops.